Welcome. I'm not Danielle. She had a wedding in the family, and so we miss her. So I get to do her job and my job today. Or at least some of it. So I invite you into the inner healing experience. Which I haven't done in a very long time. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin the inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner acceptance and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging the higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems, while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of the infinite presence, I simply speak these words. I surrender.
I surrender.
Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, now I say, I forgive.
I forgive.
Realizing that I am continually experiencing the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only constructive, positive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose.
I choose.
I now center upon that one special idea that I am willing to accept as real for me in this coming week, visualizing the idea as already acted upon and brought to pass, in seeing my idea become a fact of my experience. I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled, and gratefully speak these words. I accept.
I accept.
Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me, I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude, and say, I release.
I release.
Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me, a family member, a friend, a mentor. has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who's not physically present in the room this morning. And I turn to that image in my mind and say, I am grateful for the good in your life.
I am grateful for the good in your life.
Now I open my eyes to the world around me, turn joyfully to the person next to me, and share my gratitude and confidence by saying, I am grateful for the good in your life.
Yeah, it's weird without Danielle here. You know? Yeah. But she's at a wedding. And that's a good place to be if you can't be here. Well, you're here, and I'm here, and the folks at home and all the ships at sea. And we're working this month, pardon me while I get adjusted up here. This is week 8 of a 9-week series. That unlike the previous 9-week series I did years ago, no one's begged me to stop. That was the series. I've shared this. I'm still processing that. It's been years. That was the series on the 9 muses, and I told you about week 6 or 7. Somebody came and said, please stop. Go on to something else. And I think it was because several of the muses represent arts that are almost indistinguishable from other arts. There's like poetry and lyric poetry. And so anyway, but this is week 8 of 9 in a series on teachings of New Thought women, a series which will continue in one form or another forever. Because in May, I'm going to do a series called 6 Ways from Sunday. And it's 6 different ideas for how to practice your spirituality that is outside of this room and outside of this hour that we spend together. And it's going to be based on a lot of different things, but chief amongst them, Francis Lord's work, and also a guy named W. Frederick Keeler, who was a divine science minister, and they have cool things to say. So that's coming in the 4 weeks in May and the first 2 weeks in June. June is Pride Month also, and I think we're going to have a surprise speaker one of the Sundays in June, the end of June as well. But I'll tell you more about that when I know more. And plus I get to do the announcements today because Danielle's not here, and won't that be fun? So never know what you're gonna hear. So today's featured woman teacher is somebody that I actually knew, because many of these are from the past, from the early 20th century or late 19th, but this one I actually knew. And you know what? She was local, and I know you knew her, and several of you in the room might have, and her name was Reverend Jane Paulson. And she was co-minister at the Unity Golden Pyramid, as it was at the time, with Sig, S-I-G, her husband of many years. And before they were here, they had been co-ministers of the chapel on the grounds of Unity World Headquarters in Lee's Summit, Missouri, and before that they were in New York City, and then they were ambassadors for the International New Thought Alliance, and they were all over the map. But when I came into religious science, they were just starting to build the Golden Pyramid here. The minister at the time at Unity was Dr. John Rankin, and it was his idea that they should have a Golden Pyramid. And the congregation, I think, kind of freaked out, some of them anyway, at the thought. But they built the thing, and it was a beautiful thing, and it's still there. They've built a second, larger sanctuary since, and it was a beautiful, amazing building. It did have drainage issues when it rained, because it's hard to put gutters on a pyramid. But I attended there sporadically. I was mostly into religious science, and we were in Bel Air at the time. But from time to time, I'd go to Unity, and Sig would usually give the Sunday message, but Jane did the meditations. And for my money, which wasn't much at the time, but for my money, her meditations were a reason to attend. His talks were fine. Don't get me wrong. His talks were wonderful. They were very good talks, but her meditations were off the charts. Her meditations, and she would come out in this little sweet, warm, embracing kind of way, and deliver. And so I have part of a script of one of them here today that said something that jumped out at me that I want to share with you, because it's just good advice. Now I've extended my comments a little further than I'd planned in talking about her, because this is a very simple message today, and I don't know if it's going to take me 30 minutes to work through it, which is what I usually get, and I am paid by the minute, so I have to, no, seriously, it's a really simple thing. It's about bringing restless thoughts home. Now, cast your mind to an order of service that would have somebody come out and do a meditation, like Lisa read the Inner Healing Experience, would come out and kind of, as we'll say today, let's all get centered. Let's all get grounded, And so she's saying to the room, Jane Paulson is, let's bring our restless thoughts. Let's invite our restless thoughts home. What are restless thoughts? Well, racing thoughts is one type of thought that she mentions. It's random thoughts. It's thoughts that are kind of all over the map about things. What sort of thoughts do we have like that? Well, I think of rehearsal thoughts. We are rehearsing. Are you rehearsing for Monday? Okay, get real with me. Right now, are you rehearsing for? Are you sitting there while I get my traction in the subject at hand? Are you sitting there letting your mind wander, thinking about Monday? You're not bad and wrong if you are. Just saying, just notice this. Because if you are, then what will tend to happen is on Monday you'll be thinking about Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. You'll be thinking about this summer and the fall and next summer, and you'll be like the fashion industry, which is rolling out stuff 2 seasons ahead. You'll be thinking about retirement. You'll be thinking about ascension. I don't know what you'll be thinking, but it's like, right? I gave a talk to some ministerial school graduates at their commencement exercises a few years ago. David Dewhurst among them, and there was something that I planned to say to the group that night, which I didn't. I said other things. But what I was going to say was that all of the working ministers in the room, and there were a bunch, I was going to say to the graduates that the working ministers in the room, the people in centers, I said right now they're sitting there and they're all for you and they're all behind you and they think this is great, and there's not a one of them that's not in some corner of their mind writing their sermon for next Sunday, thinking about their class next Tuesday. Well, this is what I mean by rehearsal thoughts. We rehearse for things. We rehearse for things that we know are coming. We also rehearse for things that have never happened in the history of the world, but could. We prepare ourselves for all sorts of eventualities, failing to take into account that the more preparation we give and the more emotional energy we provide to that, the more we are magnetizing those situations toward us. So, for example, when we think about conflict and what will happen if this conversation goes wrong, or what will happen if I don't get what I want, or something like that, we start to rehearse and we start to prepare, and we're in like martial arts training in our minds. There used to be next door here, and maybe still is from time to time since the pandemic things were weird, but there's a martial arts studio behind the church next door to us here, and they had little kids, and they come out in their little judo, I forget what they're called, little judo robe things with belts and stuff, and I'd see them when I used to work nights here in classes, and so I see these kids come out of there, and it's like they wanted to whoop somebody because they were trained. They were trained, but the class ended, and it was time for their mommies and daddies to come get them and take them home like the teddy bears picnic, But they wanted to whoop somebody. Why? Because they were ready. They were kind of in. So we want to whoop somebody sometimes in our minds, and we rehearse for this. And then when in an unpredictable way conflict crosses our path, we're all offended. Well, I did nothing to warrant this, except what we did was train for it and pulled it kind of out of the ethers to come our way. So rehearsal is one form of random thinking that it's good to notice that we have. Another is rehashing, which is past, events that we go over and over and over again. Stuff that the older I get, the more ridiculous this seems. Because I can go back to stuff. I can think about times. I had a checkered academic career. Let's put it that way, I was a lazy, inattentive student much of the time. I was the kid gazing out the window and all of this. And I can think of several humiliations that I suffered, and rightly so. But I can make my body react to those experiences as though they were happening in real time. Okay? And this was over 50 years ago. This was 50, 60. How in the world old am I? This was 60 years. All of the parties involved, except maybe my classmates, are long off the planet. And the experience was forgotten by everybody but me within 10 minutes. But I can pull this thing up and rehash it, and I bet I'm not alone. I bet you do the same thing, don't you? You think of times when you blew it. You think of times when, and I don't know why it is that we're drawn more to those experiences than to the times we triumphed, but we are. Because you've had many occasions in your life where you outdid yourself, where you were heroic, you were magnificent. But that tends not to be what the mind is drawn back to. No, it's drawn back to the times when we just kicked it down the street. And so that's another form of inattentiveness that we have. The things that we're supposed to be doing, the feeling that you may have that you need to be somewhere other than where you are. If you're at home, you should be at the office. If you're at the office, you should be at the gym. If you're at the, right? And so you think, all right, well then, and you get in the car and you go to the place where you think you should be, and no sooner do you get there than you think you should be somewhere else. And you're missing out on some, the FOMO is how they style this now. The fear of missing out. The fear of missing out. That somewhere there's something going on that's really important that you should be at and you're not. So that gets in the way. And then don't get me started on God and religious topics, because that has us all over the map. And I'm going to dwell on that point in particular in 2 weeks. I've already got 2 weeks. My talk, say what I do? 2 weeks from now, you're going to get a great talk. I have it already planned for you. Today, not so much, but 2 weeks, you'll have this great talk. But we go into God and the meaning of life. And one of our colleagues in the ministry, we have a listserv sort of thing that I get a weekly digest from. One of our colleagues asked yesterday, he said, what do you all teach, talking to other ministers, what do you all teach about life after death? Because Ernest Holmes says that he believes that we continue in an upward spiral. But what do you... And then it cut off the question, ... and you had to open the website and log in and do all this to read the rest of it, which I haven't done yet. But I thought, that's the thing that we kick around. It's like, are there parallel dimensions to this one? And we'll wonder about that while life is going by. Well, wonder about that while people are in front of us saying things, wanting a reaction, wanting a relationship. We'll wonder, are there parallel universes? What really is on the other side of a black hole? Who knows? Furthermore, who cares? Astronomers, okay, it's interesting. Sure, it's great. It's an article that you run through, but so often we're drawn to these big cosmic mysteries. Also, a thing metaphysicians do is, what does this really mean? What does this really mean? You can do this with personal communication. Somebody comes up to you and they say something like, oh, I don't know, I love you. Well, what do they mean by that? What do they want from me? You know, we parse things. We look for symbols where none maybe, well, symbols always exist, but we look for interpretations of symbols that might not be real. Reminds me of you ever read Mad Magazine? This is what I was doing when I should be studying, you know, when I was a kid, reading trash like that. But Mad Magazine, they had a cartoon in there one time. This individual wants to buy a new car, can't decide between a Plymouth and an Oldsmobile or something, you know. And so they decide to flip a coin. Heads Plymouth, tails Oldsmobile. They flip it. It comes up tails. They said, oh, man, I really wanted the Plymouth. Now think about that a moment. Everyone's always a choice, but sometimes we think our choice is determined by factors outside of us, especially meaningless and silly factors like a flip of a coin, or the opinions of others from 50, 60 years ago. We want what we want for reasons that we're not clear on because we're busy pleasing images in our mind, busy trying to win approval from people who aren't around anymore, or if they are, have either given their approval or won't, you know, no matter what. This is how we spend a remarkable amount of our time instead of simply deciding. So I read this thing the other day, and it said, this is from W. Frederick Keeler. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but this is where I've been. And he's talking about, because it's old-timey stuff from early 20th century, so it's a little dated, the imagery and all. He says, you call the butcher. I know it's Earth Day and we don't eat meat, but you call the butcher. You don't beg the butcher to do what the butcher does, nor do you bully the butcher. You simply say what you want. You simply say what you want. And you trust that the butcher knows how to be a butcher and knows how to go get what it is you've ordered, and that the transaction will be taken care of. That's so remarkably straightforward that it can't be true. You know, we have to finesse, and we have to finagle, and we have to do all of these things, and these are part of our restless thoughts. So, and there are countless more examples, and you've probably thought of many while I've been rattling on here, of restless thoughts that you have. So it's time for a remedy. And the remedy is what it came to me today. The remedy is like a mental border collie. A mental border collie. What does a border collie do? It herds things, chief amongst them sheep, and it cattle too, and it'll herd these things and keep them in line and keep them all kind of headed in the same direction. What a border collie won't do is bite the animals that it's charged with tending. Nor will it negotiate with them. Nor will it strike deals, wheedle, finagle, plead, or bully. It just moves things along. We need a mental border collie. And what that is for me is the idea that God is all there is. Or, if you don't care for the name God, think of it as the divine nature. is all there is. And that will shuffle the deck. I'll tell you, that will cause all of these different random thoughts to sort themselves into legitimate order. When you say to yourself with conviction and say it repeatedly, build the habit over time that there is one life and that life is my source and that life is all the life there is. And leave it at that. We're not turning this at this point into a full-blown affirmative prayer. We're just having this knowing of I amness. Then the thoughts that don't need to be heard will recede. And the thoughts which support and elevate will advance. And out of nowhere, things will occur to us that are supportive and kindly and strong about ourselves and about others and about the world. And we'll have a plan. And we'll have a plan. We'll understand our motives, our ambitions, our intentions. And I'm sitting there listening to that song they did just before the talk. You know, we won't be driven by greed. What motivates greed? The fear of lack. The fear of lack. If there is one life and that life is limitless source, where is lack? How is lack possible? And we'll say, well, look at these people over here. They're lacking right now. Yeah, on the material level. Maybe you have on the material level. Maybe you are on the material level. But you know what? You take a description of the material level and you launch it at somebody else, and it sounds strangely like a curse rather than a blessing. But if you look at these quote-unquote, these people over here who are experiencing lack and say, right where those people are, my neighbors are people half a world away, right where they are, there is limitless supply making itself known to them, expressing all around them. That's a blessing. And you know what blessings do? This sounds a little old-timey, but it's true. They rebound on the one who blesses, just as curses rebound on the one who curses. Now, I know that's dramatic and all, but when we say, oh, these poor, wretched people, that's kind of a curse. And when we say these beautiful, amazing angels in waiting, you know, that's really kind of a blessing. And it rebounds to us. This is the power of thought. And greed goes away, and every kind of unhealthy, sort of narcissistic, self-absorbed pattern of motivation begins to diminish and evaporate, really, when we realize that we're constantly in the midst of infinite possibility we can use for good. And so then, now we have clarity. Now we have purpose. Now, there is room. I will get 30 minutes out of this in one way or another. There is room for whimsy. Whimsy is good, but you need to know you're doing it rather than just trail off into it. Look, we all have, most of us, I guess anyway, smartphones, right? You have a smartphone? Every successive phone that I've gotten has had more stuff on it. It's got games on it. It's got all kinds of time-wasting sort of things. And I'll sit there and I'll pick it up and I'll play solitaire. And I play a child's version of solitaire on my phone. It's so easy, I always win. It's draw one card at a time. How can you lose at this thing? You know, it's basically throwing cards into a hat, you know. But I'll do this to pass the time, and it's a calming sort of thing and all this. And I'll sit there half of the time, most of the time, thinking I should be doing something more constructive than this. So what I've started to do, it's been a while now, is I set aside time to do nonsensical things and give myself full permission for that. And that way I'm not working at cross purposes for myself. So we can do this. You could even, if you want to judge people, I don't recommend it. I'm in recovery from it, like all of us are, you know, because I come from a long line of people who thought that was a good idea. to judge others before they judge you. Talk about twisting scripture, you know. And I don't mean I'm not throwing rocks at my family. I kind of mean the culture generally, you know. Get them before they get you. But if you need to judge, set aside time for it and just have a good old judge fest about all the people that just really irritate you and how foolish they are and all, and then be done with it. Set a timer if you have to, you know. And in this way, you develop clarity of thinking. One last thing, and that is talking about directed thought, choosing thought. The question comes up from people, what about if I can't? What about if I have a cognitive disorder where I cannot sort out my thoughts in this kind of a way? Well, there's good news for you. Somebody can help you with this. It's why we have practitioners, and not just practitioners, but the person in the seat next to you, okay? Somebody can know something for you on your behalf with your full permission that can help work through whatever apparent architecture of the brain you are experiencing. No one is left out of this, in other words. You don't have to have a mind like the proverbial steel trap in order to use this technology of mind. Wherever you are with it, take it as far as you can, including medication as needed. And somebody else can know a truth about you, which is why last week, in talking about Frances Lord's work, where she said, cast your thinking far and wide. You remember that? Cast your thoughts far and wide. Cast them to the world. This means help other people, including the total stranger, not just the people who come to you and they say, I need some help getting my act together, but the total stranger that you see, the broken down car that you pass on the side of the highway, you know? And they're okay, they got their smartphone, and so they're calling for help and all of this, and you need to be someplace, and maybe you know, it's not you can't stop, or for whatever, you know. Cast your thoughts far and wide. Cast a blessing to them. Say, right where that person is now. Infinite supply is infinite support as they're getting exactly what they need to be fully who they are. And if there's somebody that you read about in the news and they, I don't know, world leader, there are a couple of generals on this planet right now that are, I'm sending every kind of positive thought I possibly can to these two to sit down and get it together in Sudan. So I can't make that happen. I don't know what I don't know what their problem is with each other that they're taking out on the populace of that country, but I do know this. They're entitled to know who they are. And when they know who they are, the weapons will drop from their hands, because they always have. The whole swords into plowshares kind of business, you know, it's automatic when you know who you are and whose you are, when you know that you are one with the only power that is. So I can't, there's a whole list of things I can't do about that situation, and there's a very short and profound list of what I can, which is to know the truth of their own being, these individuals and all who follow them, and that everybody knows who they are, and that everybody experiences the beauty and the wonder of the divine nature within, because it's there. And I'm not putting it there, and I'm not asking it to be invented for them or pulled, you know, out of thin air, but it's already there. It is their nature. It is their nature. And so in that way, the restless thoughts come home. She doesn't say it's about sending restless thoughts to hell, or, you know, banishing restless thoughts or slapping them around or anything like that. She said, no, you bring them home. You bring them home. Home to what? Home to the idea that there's one life, and that life is source, and that life is all the life there is. So let's know together just that now. One life, one power, one presence, pure spirit. Everywhere radiant, everywhere like a spring morning. And I affirm and know for each one of us here in this room, here watching, at home, or on the road, we each know who we are. We know our intentions, we know our values, we know our purposes, we know what it is we've set out to do. We even know what it is we came to this life to do. In an unfolding pattern of joyous good, and I affirm and know that everything necessary for this to unfold is now presenting itself, and everything that would act as an impediment for this to unfold is now exiting the scene, leaving in its place a clear and confident knowing of absolute oneness with our source, bathed in unconditional love, enjoying this springtime morning and all that is yet to come. For this knowing and its manifestation in form, I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is.
So it is.
You have to go all the way in the back, Lisa, so I can make a grand entrance. You know what amazes me is how you and Danielle managed to put all that stuff so fast in the chat there. It's amazing. First of all, the announcements. First of all, if you park behind the gate and you want to leave your vehicle at the center while you go for lunch, move it from behind the gate, because if you don't, you might get locked in, and we want that to happen. Secondly, the practitioners of the day are going to be Jim Cantor, and he will go in the kids' room at the back. And then online it will be Michael Levinson. So I encourage all of you to take advantage. These are free practitioner sessions. So please take advantage of them. They don't like being sat online, nobody comes, and they also don't like it when they're in the room at the back and they're all on their own. Of course they can treat for themselves, but that's not the object of the exercise. So when Reverend Jesse was talking this morning, it kind of reminded me of Wayne Dyer, and this is not a direct quote. He said once he was in school and he was daydreaming and looking out of the window, and this voice, the teacher, said, "Mr. Dyer, would you mind rejoining us?" And he said, "Not really." So he was way off there. So another way to summarize, at least I would summarize the first part of Reverend Jesse's talk was simply to be here now. And that's typically what Danielle uses when she does her meditation. So I encourage all of you to be here now. I also like to add on to what Reverend Jesse was saying about Frank Cavazos. And I'm just asking you, whether you knew him or not, if you would please hold his family in your prayers. You know, he passed away this past week. And it's really comforting when you can actually help somebody through the grieving process. And although you didn't know most of these people personally, you can help them by just holding them in consciousness, by going into treatment, and you can do that. As we go into treatment today, I'm going to ask each of you to simply be here right now. And as we treat, I'm going to treat for what is highest and best for each of you. I don't know what it is, but Spirit knows. So as I go through this spiritual mind treatment this morning, the first part of which is meditation, I'm just going to know for each of you. So just be present in this moment right now. And I know that there is one source of life in this whole universe. There's one presence. It expresses itself in so many multitudinous ways. It expresses itself as the stars in the heavens. It expresses itself as the constellations, the galaxies. It expresses itself as this earth, Gaia. It expresses itself in each and everything that is on this earth, material and immaterial. It expresses itself as each and every person on this planet. And it expresses itself as me right now. And in this knowingness, I know that I am one with this source. There is no separation. because there is only one. So in this knowingness of this oneness that I am with this source, I am knowing for each and every person in this room, each and every single person who is still on this broadcast, I'm knowing for each and every one of them that that idea which is most important to them this week, that they bring to mind right now. And I am knowing and I am seeing and I'm feeling that that expression is manifesting into material reality, even as I speak. And I can do this because there is only this one source, and this source always responds to me. This power is within me, it's within each and every one. And I claim that this is the truth. This is the truth of who I am, it's the truth of who each and every person here is. And in this knowingness, and in deep gratitude for this, in deep gratitude for everything, for Creative Life Spiritual Center, for each and every person here, for our musicians, our ministers, our practitioners, all those who support us in unknown ways. I am so deeply grateful. I am grateful for life itself. And in this gratitude, I release my word into that divine law that has no choice but to say yes. And so it is.
And so it is. Say it with me now, something wonderful is happening through me.
Something wonderful is happening through me.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in everything I am.
I feel it in everything I am.
I choose it.
I choose it.
I trust it.
I trust it.
I use it.
I use it.
And I love it.
I love it.
So it is.
And so it is.
Okay, next time I gotta be on the other side.
Yeah, yeah.
I need the other side stretch.
Yep. The whole thing.